Welcome to today's edition of the Black Hole Podcast. And you often hear this when it comes to people, other groups speaking on African America, right? They say, my people came from such and such, they were poor, but they pulled themselves up by the bootstraps. They did this, they did that, now they're achieving. Why can't the blacks do that? You know, what's wrong with the blacks? Why can't the blacks lift themselves up? Why do the blacks complain about the past? Why do the blacks do this, do that? You hear that often on the internet. And I'm sure in some circles, if you rub elbows long enough with certain people. But there is a simple explanation of why Black Americans struggle more. It's down to the fact that we're very different. We're not immigrants. You look at the American dream, it was made for immigrants because all of white Americans were immigrants. They all came here willingly. All Latino Americans. Well, most Latino Americans. There's a percentage that were the border crossed them. Actually, they didn't cross the border crossed them. That is true for some Latinos, but that's not most. That's not most at all. Asians and wherever else people come from, South Asia, East Asia, whatever, Middle East. Those people all were immigrants, descendants of immigrants. And the American dream made for the Americans that immigrated means that you work hard, you can achieve. And for the most part, that's true for the immigrants. Black people, African Americans, our story is totally different. And this matters even today, even though slavery wasn't so long ago. It matters to this very day because that history of oppression, I say there's two groups that faced true oppression in the United States. There were Native Americans, Black Americans. They faced oppression. And that history of oppression, it resounds to this very day because let's say your great-grandfather was a sharecropper, owned nothing, lived hand to mouth, wasn't educated, right? What that sharecropper can pass down materially and culturally is not going to be the same as someone who, let's say, maybe they're a working class. Let's say they're a working class white, Irish background. They most likely they had the opportunity to at least own something, pass something down materially, pass things down culturally. That Black America just, in often cases, they weren't able to do that, pass down as much because of oppression, not discrimination. Now, many groups face discrimination. Asians heavily discriminated against. They were blocked from coming to the country at some times. Heavily discriminated against. On the West Coast especially, heavily discriminated against Asians, Latinos, Mexicans in particular. Heavy discrimination, but not oppression. Oppression is when the full weight of the system bears down on you, keeping you in a certain place, keeping you from rising up, keeping you uneducated, keeping you poor. That's oppression. Not only attacks you financially, it's going to attack you culturally, it's going to attack you on all fronts. And African Americans, Native Americans, those are the groups that faced oppression. These other groups, anybody descended from an immigrant, they didn't face that oppression. Not in the United States. They might have faced it in their country. Maybe that's why they came here. But they did not face oppression in the United States. Matter of fact, in the 1960s, when immigration reform happened, or 60s or 70s, you started seeing immigrants all over the world now allowed to come to the United States. They got here. The slate was a clean slate to start over and build that American dream. The Black Americans still have a lot of baggage to deal with. And now historical baggage, that historical oppression, delayed the progress. So when there was actual lifting of such oppression, there is still stagnation because culturally, this is key. Culturally, Black America was crushed. African America was crushed culturally. You know, what little remnants remain was extinguished with the drugs, the crimes. So we basically have a fraction of the culture we used to have. And a fraction of that culture we used to have decades ago, is nothing compared to what we had originally, what we should have. Our ancestors were lost their language, religion, everything. Everything was lost. So you have people whose culture was demolished. That does something. That does something. And you can't bounce back easily from that. So in place of actual culture, a positive culture, you got the drugs, crimes, out of wedlock births, all that stuff, that skyrocketed conveniently as soon as civil rights happened, as soon as the oppression got lifted, boom. You got crime, you got drugs, you got all this stuff. And now no one can make you take drugs, no one can make you commit a crime. So you can't put that on no one else, but that it was able to take hold in the Black community because the lack of a cultural void. And that void continues to this day. It's filled with a lot of negativity, a lot of things promoted in Black America would never be promoted in other cultures. Merely because that's all we have, so we promote that. We promote street culture, crime culture, a lot of degenerate things that are a detriment to our survival and to our progress. That's because there's nothing else to promote. But hopefully that can change in the future. But to sum it up, other groups, they came here. Maybe they had some discrimination. Maybe they had a hard time. Maybe they were poor, but they didn't face oppression that Black Americans faced.